The first thing Dahlia ever learned about powerful men was that they didn't look at women like her. Not really. They looked through her, around her, past her, the way you look past a piece of furniture that's always been there. Useful. Unremarkable. Easily replaced. At 26, Dahlia Reyes had made a kind of peace with that. She wasn't bitter about it. Not exactly. Bitterness required energy she didn't have after a double shift at the Beaumont Hotel, hauling linens down 14 floors of marble corridor, scrubbing grout with her knuckles until they cracked and bled in winter. She was 5'3" and nearly 270 pounds. With dark hair she kept in a braid because loose hair got caught in things, and a face her mother called beautiful and the rest of the world called forgettable. She had a night school degree in accounting she hadn't finished, and a studio apartment in the East Ward that smelled like her neighbor's cooking, and a particular loneliness of a woman who is always almost enough. She had worked the housekeeping floor at the Beaumont for 3 years. She knew which guests left their Do Not Disturb signs out as warnings rather than preferences. She knew which rooms had been booked under false names. She knew which minibar charges had been built twice and quietly corrected before anyone noticed. She noticed things. It was the one talent she had never been able to turn into money, but it had kept her out of trouble more times than she could count. The trouble she could not keep herself out of walked into the hotel on a Thursday in November, when the weather had turned mean and the streets ran grey with sleet. His name was Constantine Voss. She didn't know that yet. Standing at her cart outside room 1408, pretending to inventory washcloths, while 2 men in the hallway finished a conversation they clearly considered private. She had come around the corner too quickly, seen them, and done the only sensible thing. Gone very still and very invisible, the way heavy women learn to do in spaces that weren't built for them. Neither man had glanced at her. One of them was short, nervous, talking too fast. The other was the kind of man you didn't look at directly. The same way you didn't look directly at something very bright. Tall, broad through the shoulders, wearing a dark coat that must have cost more than 3 months of Dahlia's rent, he had the kind of stillness that didn't come from calmness. It came from the certainty that nothing would move without his permission. The transfer happens Friday, the nervous one said. Benedetti's people confirmed. Then tell Benedetti's people, the tall man said, that if anything goes wrong between now and Friday, I will hold them personally responsible. Not their organization. Them. The nervous one nodded so fast his chin nearly hit his chest. He left. The tall man stood alone in the hallway for a moment, and in that moment, without moving his head, his eyes slid sideways and found Dahlia. She expected the usual, the dismissal, the not quite look that said you don't count your furniture, carry on. What she got instead was a pause. He looked at her the way she looked at things, fully, carefully, the way you look when you actually want to know what you're seeing. How long were you standing there? He asked. His voice was low and unhurried. It had an accent she couldn't fully place, somewhere Eastern European, worn smooth by too many years in American cities. Long enough to realize I should have taken the service elevator, Dahlia said. He studied her for another moment. Then something that wasn't quite a smile moved across his face and was gone. What's your name? Dahlia. Dahlia. He said it the way people said names when they were deciding whether to remember them. Do you always listen to conversations that aren't yours, Dahlia? I wasn't listening, she said, which was true. I was waiting for you to finish so I could get to the linen closet. He looked at her cart. He looked at her hands, chapped from bleach and cold water, nails cut short and practical. He looked at her face. You're not afraid, he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation, the way a scientist observes something unexpected in a petri dish. Of what? He didn't answer. He turned and walked to the elevator, and the doors closed behind him, and Dahlia let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Her hands were shaking slightly as she unlocked the linen closet. She told herself it was the cold. She saw him again the next morning. The Beaumont had a private dining room on the 2nd floor, not advertised, not listed on the hotel's website, used for the kind of meetings that didn't put themselves in writing. Dahlia cleaned it on Fridays before it opened. She had her own key and a window of 45 minutes between 7 and 7:45. She was 40 minutes into it when the door opened and Konstantin Voss walked in with 4 other men and stopped when he saw her. She was on her knees cleaning the baseboard behind the credenza. She stood up slowly because her knees weren't good in cold weather and turned around. "I was told this room would be ready by 7, one of the men said. He was broad and blonde and wore his irritation the way some men wore cologne, heavily and as a warning. He looked at Dahlia the way men like him always looked at women like her, which was to say, he looked at her like a problem. "It will be," Dahlia said. "I have 5 minutes. We need the room now. Then you'll need it dirty." She turned back to the baseboard. The silence that followed was the specific silence of men who were not accustomed to being answered. Then she heard Konstantin Voss say quietly, "Let her finish." She finished in 4 minutes. She gathered her supplies without hurrying, without making herself small, without the apologetic half-crouch she had spent years learning to perform for guests who found her presence an inconvenience. She was almost at the door when his voice stopped her again. "Dahlia." She turned. The other men were settling into their seats. Konstantin Voss was still standing. He was looking at her with that same focused attention, like she was something he was in the middle of figuring out. "There's a glass on the sideboard," he said. "The one on the left. What do you see?" It was a strange question. She looked at it. Crystal, heavy-bottomed. About a third full of amber liquid. She had set it out herself 20 minutes ago. Poured from the bottle she'd found on the cart outside the door. The one labeled for this room's service order. She looked more carefully. The liquid was slightly cloudy. Not dramatically, not obviously, but she had poured from the same bottle into 4 other glasses on the same tray, and those were clear. This one wasn't. Her stomach did something unpleasant. "I see a glass that needs to be replaced," she said. She walked to the sideboard. She picked up the glass. She carried it to her cart and set it inside the bag she used for broken items. Then she went back to the service table, poured fresh from a sealed bottle she cracked open herself, and carried it back. She set it down in front of Konstantin Voss. He had not moved. He had not taken his eyes off her. "You're certain," he said. "The other 4 are from the same pour. That one wasn't right." She paused. "I could be wrong." "You're not wrong," he said. She left. In the hallway, she walked to the service elevator, stepped inside, leaned against the wall, and allowed herself exactly 30 seconds of shaking before she pressed the button for the basement. She had just told the man she didn't know that someone had tampered with his drink. She had done it quietly, practically, with no drama. Because drama would have meant questions, and questions meant she'd have to explain that she'd been paying close enough attention to notice, and she didn't know yet what that attention would cost her. She found out at noon, when a man she'd never seen before appeared at the entrance to the housekeeping station and said, "Mr. Voss would like to speak with you." The meeting room they brought her to was not the private dining room. It was smaller, on the 4th floor. No windows. The kind of room hotels kept for conversations they didn't want overheard. Konstantin Voss was already there. So were 2 other men, positioned near the walls in the particular way of people who were there to make you aware of them. Dahlia sat down across from him. She put her hands on the table so they could see she wasn't nervous, which was almost true. "You noticed the glass," he said. "Yes." "Why didn't you say anything? In the room, in front of the others." "Because I didn't know who put it there." She kept her voice even. "If I'd made it a thing, whoever did it would have known I saw." He was quiet for a long moment. "You've worked here 3 years," he said. "How do you know that?" "I know most things about places I stay." He laced his fingers together on the table. "In 3 years you filed 4 internal complaints, all of them about billing errors, not about treatment. You returned a wallet left in room 912 with $400 in cash. You corrected a double charge on the Nakamura account that the billing department missed for 6 months. You have a night school transcript with a grade of A in both accounting courses you completed before you stopped." Dahlia felt the particular cold that comes not from temperature but from the realization that someone has been looking at you more carefully than you knew. I stopped because I couldn't afford the next semester, she said. I know that too. She looked at him directly. What do you want, Mr. Voss? And he asked her the question. He asked it the way he seemed to do most things, quietly, without warning, his eyes on her face the whole time. If you had let me drink from that glass, he said, the city would have been rid of someone who has done significant damage to it. You had every reason to look the other way. You had no reason at all to help me. So why did you? The two men by the wall were very still. Dahlia thought about the question. She didn't think about it the way you think about a trick question, hunting for the safe answer. She thought about it the way she thought about everything, practically from the inside out. Because it wasn't my decision to make, she said. He waited. Whether you deserve to live or die. That's not something I get to decide based on 30 seconds of overheard conversation and a cloudy glass. Maybe you're terrible. Probably you're terrible. But I don't know that. And I don't do things I don't know. She paused. Also, I would have been the last person to handle that glass. That's not a position I want to be in. Something shifted in his face. Not warmth exactly. Something more unsettling than warmth. Recognition. Most people would have said they did it out of goodness, he said. Or fear. Most people would have been lying. Yes, he unfolded his hands. They would have. He looked at her for a long time. Long enough that the two men by the walls shifted uncomfortably, which seemed to please him. I'm going to offer you something, he said. You're going to refuse it because it will seem like I'm trying to buy your silence or your loyalty or both. I'm not. I'm offering it because you noticed something 6 men with considerably more invested in staying alive did not notice, and I respect competence more than almost anything. He named a number. It was enough to finish her accounting degree, pay off her remaining debt from her mother's hospital bills, and still have enough left over to move out of the East Ward. Dahlia looked at him. What do you want in return? She said. Nothing. Yet. That's the part that concerns me. It should, he said. That means you're paying attention. She thought about it for longer than he probably expected. Then she said, I'd like it in writing. Not what it is, just the amount, and that it's a gift with no conditions. He looked at her like she'd done something remarkable. She hadn't. She'd done accounting. All right, he said. She didn't hear from him for 3 weeks. She finished her shift. She cashed the transfer he sent, through a legitimate financial instrument, carefully structured, which told her things about him she hadn't known. She enrolled in the spring semester. She moved to an apartment in a building that didn't smell like other people's lives. She did not tell anyone. She didn't have the kind of friendships that invited confessions of this particular variety. She thought about him more than she wanted to, not the way you think about someone attractive, though he was, in the way of things that are also dangerous. She thought about him the way she thought about him, the way she thought about unsolved numbers, the ones that kept rearranging themselves in the back of her mind until they gave up their logic. He called her on a Wednesday in December from a number she didn't recognize. Someone in my organization has been providing information to a competing group, he said, without preamble or greeting. I have a meeting on Friday with everyone I think it might be. I need someone in the room who isn't one of mine. Dahlia sat on the edge of her new bed in her new apartment and looked at the wall. You want me to watch them, she said. I want you to notice things the way you notice the glass. I'm not an investigator, Mr. Voss. I'm a housekeeper. You have a better than 50% chance of being right and a 0% chance of making it worse than it already is. Everyone else I might trust for this is also a suspect. She was quiet. I'll pay you, he said. It's not about the money. Then what is it about? She thought about the right answer. The true answer. It's about what happens if I'm wrong. Or right. If you're wrong, nothing changes. If you're right, he paused. The person responsible will be removed from the situation. Removed. Yes. She understood what removed meant. She was not naive, and she had not been naive since she was approximately 12 years old and learned that the world was not arranged for people like her. I want to be clear about something, she said. I'm not going to become someone who helps you do what you do. I noticed a glass. I told you. That's it. Whatever I tell you Friday, what you do with it, that's yours, not mine. Understood. And I want to be able to walk away. You can always walk away, Dahlia. She didn't fully believe that, but she went. The meeting was in a private room at a restaurant in the quarter. New Orleans had been his base for 2 decades, she'd learn later, chosen for its particular gift for looking away. 8 men around an oval table. She was brought in as support staff, a catering role, moving quietly between the sideboard and the table, close enough to watch but positioned as invisible. She had been invisible her whole life. She had never imagined it would become useful. She watched them the way she watched numbers, looking not for the loud errors, the obvious ones, but for the places where the pattern broke just slightly. The small miscalculations. There was a man named Reeves, late 40s, watchful eyes, a gold ring he kept twisting on his right hand. She'd noticed him immediately, not because he was nervous, because he was performing not nervous. There was a difference. She had spent 3 years watching guests pretend to be comfortable in spaces that intimidated them. This was the same thing, but it wasn't Reeves. It was the younger one, Calder. Barely 30, quiet, positioned at the end of the table in a way that gave him sight lines to the door. Twice during the meeting, when Constantine said something that implied internal knowledge, Calder's eyes went to his phone before he stopped himself. The second time, he looked up and scanned the table to see if anyone had noticed. Dahlia was refilling a water glass 12 feet away. She looked like furniture. She caught Constantine's eye as she moved to the sideboard. She set down the pitcher. She took a small notepad from her apron, the kind she'd used for room service orders for 3 years, and wrote 1 word and a table position. End left. She folded it once. When she moved behind his chair, she set it on the table beside his hand. She went back to the sideboard, did not watch him read it. The meeting ended 40 minutes later. Calder left third. He did not make it to the elevator. Dahlia didn't know what happened after that. She didn't want to know. She gathered the water glasses, restacked the napkins, and went home on the streetcar, watching the city slide past the rain-fogged windows. Constantine Voss called her the next morning. "You were right," he said. "Okay," she said. "You're not going to ask how I know?" "No." A pause. Most people want confirmation. "I know I was right," Dahlia said. "I don't need you to tell me." Another pause, longer this time. "I want to offer you something more permanent," he said. "A role. You would have access to information that needs someone with your particular skill set, pattern recognition, discretion, the ability to be in a room without being remembered." "What you're describing," Dahlia said carefully, "sounds like a job working for a criminal organization." "Yes. I have a semester of accounting to finish." "Finish it. The offer stands after." She was quiet for a long time, long enough that he said her name once to see if she was still there. "I'm thinking," she said. "Take your time." What would it look like, specifically? He told her. It was not what she'd expected. Not violence, not illegality in any direct sense. It was observation, analysis. The thing she'd done her whole life, quietly, for no one but herself, in rooms where no one thought to look at her. "I have conditions," she said. "I expected you would. I set my own hours. I don't report to anyone but you. If I see something that crosses a line, my line, not yours. I walk, and you don't make that difficult. Those are reasonable conditions. And one more." She steadied her voice. "You never introduce me to anyone as staff, or support, or help. If I'm in a room, I'm in the room." He was quiet. "You want to be seen," he said. "I've been invisible my whole life," she said. "I'm done with it." "Yes," he said. "Not to her condition. Or maybe to that too." "All right." She looked out her window at the grey December street. She thought about her mother's kitchen, where she'd grown up doing math at the table because there was nowhere quiet to study. She thought about 3 years of marble hallways and chapped hands, and the particular indignity of being looked through by people who needed her far more than they would ever admit. "I'll think about it," she said. "Give me 2 weeks." 2 weeks, he agreed. She hung up. She sat for a long time in the quiet of her apartment. Then she opened her accounting textbook. Chapter 9, Forensic Auditing, which she had always found more interesting than people expected, and she got back to work. She called him 14 days later, at 8 in the morning, because she had decided that if she was going to do something she'd never imagined doing, she was going to do it on her own schedule. "I'll take the arrangement," she said. "But I want one thing made clear." "Name it." "What I bring you. My observations, my analysis. That's mine. I give it to you. You use it however you use it. But you don't get to tell me I'm wrong about what I see. You can disagree. You can choose not to act on it. But you don't get to tell me what I see isn't real." He was quiet for a moment. "Has someone been telling you that your whole life?" he said. The question surprised her. She hadn't expected it from him. She hadn't expected him to ask anything that wasn't tactical. "Yes," she said simply. "Then we understand each other," Constantine said. "Welcome." She didn't know, standing in her small, bright kitchen in the early December light, what she was walking into. She didn't know about the war that was coming with the Benedetti Group, or the 3 months she'd spend in a rented house in Metairie going through 8 years of falsified financial records, or the night she'd spend in a car outside a warehouse on the river, relaying information through her earpiece to a man she'd met 6 weeks ago and still hadn't entirely figured out. She didn't know that he would eventually stop introducing her as his associate and start introducing her as his partner, and that this would cause more trouble in his world than anything she'd ever uncovered in it. She didn't know any of that yet. What she knew was this. Her whole life, people had made the mistake of looking past her. Past the body that took up too much space, past the hair that wasn't right, past the job that didn't signal intelligence or ambition or worth. They had looked past her, and they had missed everything. It had cost some of them a great deal. It was, she thought, about to cost a great deal more. She closed her accounting textbook. She got her coat from the hook by the door. She went out into the cold New Orleans morning, and she walked toward whatever came next with the particular confidence of a woman who has spent a lifetime being underestimated and has finally found somewhere worth spending it. I keep thinking about that glass. The way Dahlia noticed something cloudy in it while 6 trained, dangerous, highly motivated men did not. She wasn't looking for it. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She was doing her job, really doing it, the way people do a job when no one's watching and no one's grading them and there's no reward for caring. And that's the thing that gets me every time I come back to this story. We talk about integrity like it's something you perform, like it shows up when the stakes are high and the audience is watching. But Dahlia had been returning lost wallets and correcting billing errors for 3 years in a building full of people who never once looked at her directly. Nobody was keeping score. Nobody was going to promote her for it. She did it because it was right and because she couldn't make herself do otherwise. That's not performance. That's character, the kind that doesn't need a witness. And then there's what she actually said when Constantine asked her why she saved him. She didn't plain goodness. She didn't pretend to be better than the situation. She said, it wasn't her decision to make. She didn't have enough information to choose who deserved to live, so she acted on what she knew and she was honest about the rest. I think about that answer more than almost anything else in this story. How rare it is. How hard it is to be that clear-eyed about the limits of your own judgment when your instincts are screaming at you to just pick a side. That's a kind of intelligence that has nothing to do with education. Dahlia had stopped her accounting courses because she ran out of money, not because she ran out of ability. She had been reading rooms, catching errors, noticing patterns for years without anyone ever calling it a skill. The world has a habit of only recognizing intelligence when it comes in the right packaging, the right voice, the right size, the right job title. Dahlia didn't have any of that. What she had was sharper and more durable, and it had been sharpened specifically by being overlooked. Because when you're invisible, you learn to see everything. What stayed with me most, though, is the condition she set at the end. Not the money. Not the safety. She said, "If I'm in a room, I'm in the room. Don't introduce me as help. Don't position me as background. See me." That took more courage than noticing the glass. It would have been easier to take the arrangement quietly, stay invisible, stay useful in the way she'd always been useful, indispensable, and uncredited. She chose not to. After 26 years of being looked through, she decided she was done with it. I don't think that decision came from nowhere. I think it came from 3 years of doing the right thing in empty hallways, from the slow accumulation of small choices made when no one was watching. That kind of quiet persistence builds something in you. A certainty that you know your own worth, even when no room you walk into reflects it back. Dahlia didn't wait for the world to decide she mattered. She already knew. She was just finally in a position to say so out loud.